Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to have you all here today. Some familiar faces, some new. And thank you for joining us tonight for the Aitken Partners Women in Business Network event for the WHO's World Mental Health Day. My name is Nicole G, and I'm a principal lawyer here at Aitken Partners, head of the litigation team here, and chair of Aitken Partners Women's Group. An acknowledgement to country. I begin this evening by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people, traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. Now, just before we begin, a few housekeeping notes. You've probably found the refreshments by now. Bar is over there, and there are nibbles provided on the tables. Bathrooms are found just off the main entrance. We'll be hearing from our esteemed panel very soon, and there will be time for questions at the end, and we will finish the formalities with the event wrapping up at about 8:30. Now, APW and how we got here. Aitken Partners became a signatory to the Charter for the Advancement of Women about 3 years ago, and out of that came Aitken Partners Women's Group. And the Charter, what is that about? It aims to promote and support strategies to retain women from all backgrounds in their profession over the course of their careers and encourage progression into senior positions. And why was APW Women in Business Network started? It was really came about as an idea that, it can be difficult for women to network. Too often, unfortunately, especially in some areas like litigation and insolvency, women are very prominent on the files and in the matters, but we don't get a great look in terms of networking. So this group is about focusing on women, putting women at the forefront, talking about issues that we care about, sharing our stories, experiences, and creating a platform for us to connect. And what's our objective? Well, I just talked about that. And it is about sharing our knowledge and celebrating women across all fields and industries. And that's why today, in terms of who's here, we have women from finance, we have from business, we have from education, in terms of lawyers, HR, different roles. Also within our organisation, it's not just the lawyers who are here. We have our very valuable supporting teams, HR, accounting, etc., who are here with us today. Now, a little bit about what APW does. We have brought to Aitken Partners a number of initiatives in support of the Charter principles. Some of them, for example, we implemented our firm's maternity leave policy. We also launched, of course, this network. We created a LinkedIn group for this group as well. We hosted an Aitken Partners Women in Business Barristers networking function, and that was really around an equitable briefing policy, because again, unfortunately, in the space of women at the bar, barristers, too often, unfortunately, despite their representation at the bar, they don't get as many briefs, or they get briefs, but unfortunately they don't get speaking roles, which sounds funny, but they might only be briefed to provide advice, but not advocate at court. So as part of that, we held a women barristers function here, inviting women who we brief already. So just trying to expand the pool of barristers that we know and love and can refer to. Now it's time to move on to our wonderful panel. I'm going to go through a bit about each of our panel members. Bear with me, but I think it's important to know their great achievements and so to know who we're hearing from. Our first is our very own Bianca Mazzarella. Bianca is an employment lawyer and a member of our litigation team, part of my team. Bianca's sharp expertise across all facets of employment and workplace relations law is complemented by being friendly and approachable that have underpinned her ability to build long-lasting client relationships. Bianca is a passionate lawyer who is well versed in managing disputes in the employment and workplace health and safety arena. She enjoys defending and representing clients at conciliations in the Fair Work Commission, at the VEOHRC and the AHREOC, and mediations in all federal and Victorian courts and tribunals. Bianca is a persuasive advocate who has the ability to provide strategic advice to clients, focusing on their desired outcomes. Welcome, Bianca. Our next speaker is Anushka Phal. Anushka is a passionate psychologist driving advocacy and change for minority communities across Australia. Anushka is the founder of Umeed Psychology, a psychology private practice and social enterprise which aims to provide accessible, culturally informed mental health care. In an effort to destigmatise mental health and create better access to mental health care in multicultural communities, Anushka has developed Safe Space, a mental health literacy and international student programs. Anushka is a passionate advocate for youth mental health, having previously worked as a school psychologist and having published research in this area. As an ambassador for the Australia and New Zealand Mental Health Association, Anushka strives to make a global impact when it comes to mental health. I also attended a wonderful wellness workshop that was led by Anushka, that was through the Victorian Women Lawyers Association, and that's actually how I thought, Anushka would be terrific for us all to hear from, so do listen in. There's some great tips and examples that I think Anushka could share with us. So welcome, Anushka, and thank you very much. Now, Mia Basich, is that right? Sorry. Mia Basich is the co-founder and director of Equilibrium and co-founder of EQ. Equilibrium is an integrated wellbeing program that supports business and their people. Mia founded Equilibrium to help businesses improve employee engagement, retention, productivity, and culture. Through her experience as a lawyer, Mia recognised a gap in proactive, strategic, and habitual well-being amongst professionals and created a solution, one that prioritises preventative well-being as the foundation for performance. In addition to Equilibrium, Mia co-founded EQ, a preventative wellbeing retreat, offering a 3-hour wellbeing journey. EQ combines evidence-based practices such as light and sound therapy, breath work, and hot and cold therapy designed to help individuals de-stress, integrate these practices into their daily lives. And EQ is a partner with Aitken Partners, and just recently, in fact, Aitken Partners launched the employee program with EQ. So Aitken Partners employees are now offered, I think it's 2 half-day sessions at your wonderful space. Some people have tried it out already and they said it's an amazing experience. And an interesting part about the journey is you can't choose. So you can't say, I'm not going to go to the light and sounds, I just want to go to the spa. You take it on a journey where you're encouraged to try the different things so you can, experience the breath work. Also encourage you not to go with your friends, to just give yourself that time to de-stress and focus. And another part of the offering from EQ that is available to our employees is also the online learnings, exercises, information to help that side of things, which is really helpful and interesting. So that's the introduction in terms of our panel. So if we could give them all a warm welcome. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's kick off with the questions. In terms of the structure, it's going to be conversational. I'll put some questions to our panel. We'll hear from them. We'll probably leave questions to the end, just so that we don't get in the way of the flow and timing. Now, so let's kick off with, so today is World Mental Health Day. So Anushka, can you please tell us what is mental health?
Yes. Great question. You know, I saw this on we had like a little chat going, there was an email, and I saw the question. I was sitting next to my partner, I'm like, and we both work in the psychology field, and I said to him, I was like, babe, what is mental health? I'm like, I know we work in this space and we should really have a down pat definition, but it's a difficult one, right? And then we had a big conversation about it, and the generic thing that we came up with was that mental health and well-being is specific to your psychological, your emotional, and I guess even like it affects your physical health. And that's what we're kind of trying to focus on. I think if we're talking about mental health and well-being, it's those aspects of your life which do actually end up impacting things like your career, your personal life, so on and so forth. So that's the terminology between two psychologists. That's what we came up with.
Terrific. So another question for you, Anushka. What do you see as some of the challenges affecting mental health, and what are some of the challenges unique to women and people of ethnically diverse backgrounds?
Yeah, I think that's a really broad question, because I think at the moment the biggest stressor for individuals overall is the economic crisis. I think the reality is that when prices increase for everything, we have to work harder, there's a lot more expectations that are put on us, and cost of living is a real issue, you know, and I know that's more at a systemic level, but that does lead to things like stress, and it causes issues between people, say in their relationships as well. It causes issues at work, you're working overtime, there's a lot of elements to it. That's sort of more broader level. If I was to bring it down to being a woman, and we did this in the wellness workshop that I ran with BWL, I asked everybody what was the aspect of their identity that they were most aware of, and a majority of the women there came back with being a woman. We're so aware all of the time of being a woman, more than being a lawyer, more than being a psychologist, more than being whatever career you're in, more than whatever other relationship you have with other people. It's being a woman, because being a woman requires juggling so many expectations. You know, I've seen it, you know, as I've got some really great women in my life, and even just growing up with my mum, who was a migrant twice over, moved from Fiji to New Zealand in an arranged marriage, moved from New Zealand to Australia so that we could have a better life, and watching her juggle things like studying, raising us at the same time, looking after her sick parents, and it just feels like, you know, it's never ending. And then also in the whole dynamic of that, I guess being in her career, she's a financial planner, so being in her career that's dominated primarily by men, needing to be taken seriously in her workplace, and then dealing with some really tough managers and, you know, bosses as well, for when she needed to take time off for particular things, and being made to feel like that's not okay. So I think, you know, from personal experience, but then professional experience and working with women, we just have so many things on our plate, and yeah, we're maybe working towards a more equal society, but the reality is there's a lot of social expectations on women that men just sometimes don't have, and that can be a lot, and it adds, you know, a lot of stress. I mean, think about how many things you're considering in your head. How many people here, while you're like finishing work up for the day, you're like, what do we, like, you know, what do I cook for dinner tonight? Even if it's just for yourself, even if you're like, you know, if you've got kids at home, okay, so-and-so is going to look after this thing, but when I get home and then like on Saturday, I've got to do this, and you're like a constant, you're like event planner, you're a, you know, you're not just what you are. There is like 700 different hats that you wear, so I think it can be quite overwhelming as an experience. We're super, but like, we shouldn't have to be superhuman.
And a little bit to the side of this question, but how does the representation of women in leadership roles affect the mental health of female employees, do you think?
Oh, in so many different ways. I think, you know, especially if you're growing up and you're not seeing role models that look like yourself, you know, I think that can really have a detrimental impact, because one, it's a really passive way of the world essentially saying to you, hey, like this just doesn't exist for us. Like, I mean, as a woman of color, I hadn't really seen a lot of other women, you know, of color in leadership positions when I was growing up. Didn't really think it was a possibility, and I still have imposter syndrome as a result of that. When I'm, even though I am well regarded in the community and I've, you know, run business and things like that, and it's so interesting to see that when representation isn't there, how it can have that little trickle down effect on your own self-worth, on your own expectations that you set for yourself. Like, I can do 10 times the amount of work, but maybe I'm actually not going to be ever able to get up to this point. So sometimes you just don't even try, and we accept where we're kind of at, you know.
That's so true and helpful. And for those who were at our function earlier in the year with Justice Betty King, I always remember she said, you can't be what you can't see.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
And that really stuck with me around this issue.
It's so true.
So Mia, I know that as part of your business, you collect data from people engaging with the business. Can you tell us, what's the data telling us about mental health and what we need?
So hopefully, well, I don't think that anything that I say right now is going to be a surprise. I think that it's really interesting. And Anushka, you've provided a really nice sort of segue, and so has this event, to what I'm about to tell you and basically enlighten you on. But when we started EQ, you know, we really wanted to understand, what are people of today facing? There are so many reports, there are so many statistics that are widely available that sort of shed, I guess, a broader picture on what modern society faces, particularly in this post-COVID world. But we were really keen on understanding, well, what are people in Melbourne specifically, day to day, facing today in 2024? And over the last 4 months, we have only been open for 4 months, the data's been really, really compelling. And the first thing is that 80% of our guests are women. Now that's interesting. We won't probably delve into reasons why it is 80% women, because that sort of warrants its own panel discussion, I'd say. And that's not to say that we're not for men. We just find that women tend to be more open to having this conversation and to engaging. I mean, we're all here tonight, right? And the data beyond that has also revealed another really common and consistent trend. And that is that the reason why women are coming to us is because they're juggling. They are stressed, and they're also lacking the tools and the education to properly support themselves. So when we survey guests about their stress, basically, and we ask them how their stress has been over the last week, those people are reporting that their stress level is a 6.2 out of 10. So that's pretty high. It's well above the average. I think, you know, we'd probably like it to sit somewhere around 5 and lower. And it seems to be sort of now increasing, particularly as we reach towards the end of the year. So social activities start to ramp up. We're thinking about Christmas. You know, we're probably thinking about, what am I going to cook for Christmas lunch, and what am I going to do for my next family holiday, and all of those things that sort of inevitably come with being a woman. Over 1/3 of our guests report feeling anxious or stressed either every day or every second day. And I'm not talking about, you know, I got home and I had a really, really bad day, and, you know, I didn't really like the way that person emailed me today, and, you know, that really pissed me off. I'm talking like pervasive stress.
Yeah.
Like, I'm anxious about what today is going to bring. I'm anxious about the daycare drop-off. I'm anxious about school drop-off. What am I going to do? But the most promising thing, and this is the part that I'm really, really excited about, because I think there's such a great opportunity in this space, is that 40%, so nearly half of those people, are telling us they want more education. They want more understanding. They want more empowerment and autonomy when it comes to their well-being. And that's the part where I feel like, you know, we need to do more to support ourselves. We need to do more to support the women around us, the women that work for us, the women that we work with, because there's such value in that education and that knowledge and that empowerment piece. So I think broadly stress, again, nobody will be surprised by that. It's the most prevalent issue. But again, there's a really great opportunity in this education piece that women are asking for. So hopefully, yeah, that helps.
Now, Bianca, in terms of workplace, what kinds of issues are affecting mental health in your practice?
I think I've been surprised over the last year, given the Me Too movement. I thought that we would move away, hopefully, from issues like sexual harassment and even bullying in the workplace, but I continue to be astounded by the amount of consults I have in relation to sexual harassment in the workplace. It's causing, particularly women, a lot of stress, and it's often younger women as well. Another prevalent issue, other than things like burnout or feeling like you're overworked and you've got nobody that you can really go to. Another main issue that I find, particularly for women, is planning for parenthood and what that looks like, valuing the workplace, whether or not they have a spot when they come back, what a maternity leave policy looks like, and so on. From my own personal experience, I had a good experience initially. I was pregnant when I got a new job, and I was told, like, no problem, because we see this as a long-term thing, and that's great. But then when I went on maternity leave and I was discussing coming back, I was told, well, you go and speak to your husband because he'll tell you how many days you can come back, and you go and work that out. And I even remember speaking to colleagues and them saying things to me. It wasn't I even remember employment law is sort of a small industry, and I even remember speaking to a colleague and him saying to me, oh yeah, I spoke to your boss, or he said, oh, Bianca has a family now, like, oh, it's different now, So these issues, I use my own personal example for a bit of a laugh too, but these issues are causing a lot of stress, still particularly for women being made redundant. There's still lots of stressful circumstances. I'm sure you hear a lot about Anushka and Mia.
Mm.
So now we've talked about some of the challenges. Now moving on to identifying when there is something going on with our mental health that needs attention.
Yeah.
So Anushka, are you able to tell us about what are the warning signs of burnout and poor mental health that you see in your practice?
I think people start recognizing burnout when you're at when the worst has kind of happened. So when we talk about burnout, there's 5 stages, and the early stages look like, I don't really feel like sending that email today. Oh, I'm gonna have to go into work again. Could I work from home? Maybe I'll be like 5 minutes late. That's okay. It looks like I'm irritated with people in my household a little bit today, more than I was yesterday, but that's okay because the weekend's going to be good, and then you have a good time. That's like stage 1 to 2. You're kind of starting to feel the little bits of it. When we hit stage 5, it's things like chronic fatigue. It looks like sleep issues. It looks like issues with your hormones because your cortisol levels go up. It looks like digestion issues because you have all of these responses happening in your body. It looks like instead of being 5 minutes late to log in, I'm going to take the day off, I'm going to take the second day off. It's the I wish I could win $22 million tomorrow instead. And quit my job. Yeah, that might actually just be most days. But I think the biggest indicator is when you start losing passion for something that you really love doing. Like most of us are in the jobs, you don't go into law or psych or well-being if you don't like doing it because it's hard. I'm going to be honest, you're working with other people, everybody wants things from you, and that's just your whole life as a woman anyway, but it's just, there's a lot going on, and I think, unless you really love the work, you're not going to be here. But if you start losing passion for it, that's where you know that you've hit the end of that stage 5 of burnout. And as somebody who's been through chronic burnout and is kind of honestly still going through it at the moment because it's hard, running a business and having to support other people, I think it's a lot harder, and I know we're going to get to maybe discussing how to overcome burnout, but it takes time to overcome. And I'm not talking days, I'm not talking weeks or months, it can take years. Because if you've been burnt out, and I was talking to someone earlier about if you're a lawyer and you're working in the legal system, you have probably been chronically burnt out since you started studying. And it's just been going on and on and on, because it's always one thing after another. So when have you had time to have a break? If you've been burnt out for the last 11 years, how long do you think it's going to take for your body and mind to recover from that?
So, Anushka, what environmental workplace factors can contribute to poor mental health and this burnout that you were talking about?
So many things. I think when we're talking about burnout, we focus on what the individual can do. At least what my clients come in, they're like, Anushka, what can I do? You know, should I be resting more? Should I be doing more self-care? And like, what else can I add to my plate on the list of things that I already have? Which sometimes feels like extra work. And like the reality is, yes, you know, a bit of the burnout recovery starts with you. But the reality is you wouldn't be at that point if if the system was better. I think there needs to be a lot of systemic change in order to prevent burnout overall across all different industries. And a really classic example is, by the time I hit the end of July, all my clients who are from finance or accounting backgrounds are like super burnt out because they've had to take on all of this extra work because their bosses have not considered that their employee to work ratio actually has to be a little bit lower, and so people are working into like 10, 11 o'clock at night and feeling like they can't take any time off. And yeah, okay, the idea is that maybe after that you might take a week off, but that's still not prevention. Like, what we need to be looking at is what can we be doing a little bit better. Another example is like the 4-hour work week. Realistically, in a lot of different sort of organizations, people are feeling really panicked of being like, I need to be logged into Teams, even though I'm not really, say you're working from home. The flexibility of working from home doesn't really feel like flexibility, because you need to be there, like rubbing your mouse and being like, okay, I'm online, even though you could probably get that work done in the time that you need to get done, and you're balancing the other parts of your like work-life balance. So that, you know, I personally think, and I know this is really idealistic of me, but I think everybody needs one day to run their personal errands, one day to deal with family and friends, and one day for themselves. So a 3-day weekend every week would be amazing for mental health. I don't know who to submit that to, but I think it'd be great. And I know that that's really idealistic of me, but like, it makes me wonder what have we, like, I guess, over time, and this is like going back, like, you know, the last 50, 60, 100 years, what have we just accepted as being like the norm and continue to accept as a norm? Because burnout, I see some people, and I've worked in like entrepreneurial space for a while now, and even talking to people at networking events and things like that people who run other businesses, and the badge of honor that people wear for burnout, it's like, I'm so burnt out, I was up till this time, and it's like, but what for if we're not looking after ourselves? And like, I tell my clients all the time, doesn't matter whether if you're working for somebody else, running your own business, everybody's replaceable. Like, you drop dead of exhaustion tomorrow, touch wood, they're just going to replace you. And no one's going to be like, wow, she works so hard. It just, you know, it's just forgotten after that point. So I think lots of factors affecting the workplace. Sorry, I just realized what your initial question was. I have ADHD, everybody, just a heads up. I'll go on my little tangents, I'll pull it back. Workplace environment, I think really listen, Hear, like, you know, talk to your employees, see what they actually need, and then implement those things. And trying to figure out, like, how can we not work more efficiently? I think, how do we work more sustainably as a group? I think that's something that needs to be addressed.
Mia, I wonder whether you can share a bit about your journey and how your workplace and that experience led you to starting EQ, and also how your sister's attitude, you know, to mental health and being an elite athlete also informed your view.
Yeah. Well, I'm by no means an elite athlete. I literally watch her, and she's an incredible human. But I'll take it back a little bit before that. And I think what's really fascinating about what you just said, Anushka, is that those first 3 stages of burnout, I feel like they're all things that we've just normalized as part of our day-to-day. Like, I've never considered any one of those things and gone, oh, hold on, that could actually be the sign of something deeper manifesting. And to be fair, they're probably all things that we have or are experiencing at the moment. And I feel like, again, this is part of the education piece.
Yeah,
it's like,
absolutely.
shit, that's burnout.
Yeah.
Like, that's what we talk about. And it's not burnout, I've done too many social things. It's burnout is in like the organizational context. It's, it's the industry's, imperative and objective to make, more effective, more sustainable workplaces and places to exist, I guess. And that sort of takes me to, where I started this part of my career, and that is off the back of working in the legal industry. So I was working in litigation, not here, somewhere else. And it was through the end of COVID that I just started feeling that fatigue, that dread each and every day of, I really hope the partner doesn't call me today, and I really hope somebody doesn't ask me to do a piece of work because I just do not have the bandwidth. I come out of literally a 9-month back-to-back couple of trials, and I was just really fatigued, and I realized that I hadn't taken time for myself. Then I went off and had my first daughter. I've only got one still. And it was the first time that I think probably since I left high school that I stopped and reflected on how I was, and that was pretty average, as in, I wasn't competent at looking after myself, let alone another human. And I found myself so reactive, so anxious, and just totally unlike myself. And then I took a few steps back, and I'm like, this is probably something that's been manifesting for quite some time now, and I just haven't really addressed or acknowledged the warning signs. And now I feel like it's too late, and I don't know where to go to get help. And so from there, I just started by, I guess, empowering myself with education and support and people and tools and resources. And then I realized, when we work in these high performance, demanding industries, we're expected to basically function like elite athletes, but we don't support ourselves like elite athletes do. And for me, it was also then having the perspective of my sister. She's incredible. She went to the Olympics. She's a 100-meter sprinter, totally ripped, doesn't look anything like me. Incredible human. But she's been an elite athlete for the better part of, I think, 25 years. And I think the one thing that's been really consistent through her life is that she's leveraged so many different tools and resources to support her performance. So even though she only runs 11 seconds a couple of times, really, a year, it's really not a huge investment of time, the way that I see it. She sees like 2 psychologists. She has a dietitian, a strength coach, a mindset coach. She sees all of these people just so she can run 11 seconds the best way that she can. And that was the first point where I was like, hold on, why don't we do any of this stuff? We normalize and we glamorize, okay, I'm sitting in the office, I'm working late, I'm sleep deprived, I'm so stressed, I'm so busy. When was the last time you walked down the street and somebody told you that they weren't busy? We've glamorized this sort of way of living, and then we've neglected ourselves in turn. And that's really, I think, what inspired me to create Equilibrium. It's, it's normalizing conversation around taking time for ourselves, around, being mindful about stepping away from the desk for a really, really short period of time, and then taking back some of that autonomy when it comes to our stress and our well-being and our health. That's a really long answer, I'm really sorry.
That's terrific. So I suppose, we've heard about what we can do, what effects the environment can have, our workplace environment can have on us. But Bianca, I wonder whether you can tell us, what's the law doing to respond in this space?
Yeah, so pretty topical is the right to disconnect. So basically what that means is following the closing of the loopholes legislation as part of the second tranche, that employees have the right not to read or respond to basically their employer outside of working hours unless it's if it's unreasonable. So how that's measured is looking at whether or not people have family responsibilities, and whether or not they're a senior employee that's remunerated outside of working hours for that time. So I think the best way to look at it is by way of example. So if, for example, you had an assistant that worked every day 9 to 4, everyone knows she's got 2 kids, she picks them up from daycare at about 5, and then you've got a boss emailing her at 5:30 saying, this is urgent, it's due Tuesday, let's say we're at Friday. It's urgent, can you come back to me? And then on Monday, she's terminated for not responding. She basically has protections under the Fair Work Act to say, well, that's adverse action, and she was exercising a workplace right to disconnect and not to respond. It's a little bit different for senior level employees where, you might have a high level executive who's expected to respond. But I think it's still good because we're opening up that conversation. Employers are thinking about, well, this right to disconnect, how does this affect me? How do I make sure I don't do the wrong thing? So there's that. And the other big one is the amendments to the Sexual Harassment Act, started in 2022. And it basically puts the onus on the employer to act proactively rather than reactively. So to make sure that there are measures in place, not just policies, but training and having those ongoing conversations about how do we actually prevent sexual harassment in the workplace. And employers, of course, have something that's called vicarious liability. So it's really important because the amount of damages that they can receive is quite high. I remember in uni doing this case, Swanson and the Monash Co-op, and I went to Monash, so I was like, oh, the Monash Co-op, it was like where you got your books. And somebody was repeatedly bullied and harassed, and the employer complained about it, and the employer repeatedly did nothing about it. And hundreds of thousands in damages were awarded. So I did think to myself, oh wow, it's taken a while, but we've actually got something in place that's proactive now. So yeah, really important changes I think that's happening. Yeah.
Now, coping strategies. Anushka, what can we do to maintain our mental well-being and thrive?
So if you're asking my immigrant mum, she'd say don't stress, and I'd say is there a button for that? But so often she's like, just don't stress about it. I'm like, what do you mean? If you're asking me as a therapist, I'd say there's a few different things that we can do for ourselves, and I think self-care feels like it has to be this really big strenuous thing that's another task that we're adding to our plate. And sometimes it can feel like that. It can feel like we have to do, one thing after another, and it's like, I already have this big to-do list, now I have to add another thing to that to-do list. Oh my goodness, but I think self-care can be really, really small. So it could be little things like drinking enough water in a day. That's a really good simple start. Having 3 meals is a really big one. That's something that a lot of people are skipping out on. Eating eating healthily throughout the day. So just, preparing your snacks and things like that beforehand. If you're going to do it for other people, you can do it for yourself, essentially. Those are the small sort of things that we're looking at. If we're going to look at it on a larger scale, how do we organize our self-care? One thing that I like to ask clients to do is to think about love languages. Everyone's heard of love languages. We do them for our partners, for the people in our lives. There's the acts of service, there's physical touch, there's I'm blanking on all the love languages. Hang on. Gift giving.
Well, that's a good one.
Yeah. What's the last two? There's 2 more. Quality time and words of affirmation. There we go. So I know when we do that for other people, it makes us feel good, but how do we do that for ourselves? So for example, words of affirmation. I have on my phone at 10 o'clock and then 2 p.m. and then I think sometime in the evening, different little reminders come up for me for whatever I think during that time I need to hear. Could be things like you're enough, slow down, are you carrying the core of you throughout your life. There's just little things that have impacted me, so those are my little words of affirmation that I have for myself. Or at the end of the day, I go through and list just in my head, what are 3 things that I'm grateful for? Despite the day that I've had, what are 3 things that I feel like this was still a good day. If we're looking at physical touch, getting a massage maybe once a month or once every 2 months, something that you can go and that's just physically for you. Gift giving, go online shopping, basically.
I'm very good at that.
Yeah. If you're not already doing it, that's it. It's a little gift for you. acts of service, you know, going out to say like a restaurant where you know that you're going to get a good quality service, whatever it is, you can come up with a big list for yourself and just picking things off there. Or another really cool, like, quote unquote trend that's happened more in the mental health space recently is having a dopamine menu. So you start off with like an entree, a mains, and a desserts, and it's just little things that you like doing for yourself. It could be like the small things, like I said, could be just drinking enough water every day, but the bigger things could be, I'm gonna paint today because I haven't painted in a long time, rediscovering different hobbies, things like that. So just, I guess, start off small, don't make it feel like it's gonna be something super daunting. And what I like to think about, especially if you're going through burnout, is once you've hit that point of burnout, a lot of the little things feel like it's too much, you know, whether if it's doing your skincare routine or, you know, there's just little things that we let go of, dressing like the way that we like dressing, and, you know, you end up in your trackies like more days than not, whatever it is. Starting off small and building up. So I always say to clients, like, picture your idealistic day. If you were not burnt out, in an ideal day or in an ideal weekend, what would that look like to you? And then pick one thing from that list and just try to do that consistently for 5 minutes. 5 minutes every day. That could be 5 minutes of exercise. It could be 5 minutes extra in the shower. It could be, you know, spending an extra 5 minutes to like get dressed in the morning, putting on that lipstick, whatever it is. 5 minutes extra, just pick a thing and then build up on that 5 minutes and, you know, continue to do that and take your time to do that, I think. We always talk about filling your own cup so that, you know, you can't pour from an empty cup. And I think, you know, I've also in the past been really, I guess, I've used the term a lot, you know, you can't pour from an empty cup, you know, which assumes that we need to fill our own cups for other people. But I just want to remind you all that you can just fill your own cup for you. Like, you can fill it up and it's okay. We can use all of this for ourselves. And just reminding yourself of that, I think, you know, it's another one of those like social expectations maybe of, depending on like the background that you've grown up with, but I feel like a lot of women feel this way, that you need to be putting everybody else ahead of yourself. And that's true, but like to some degree, maybe if you've got children or elderly parents or like a partner, but you need to put yourself first, because like if you don't do it, who is? And like the reality is, like, from the moment you're born to the moment you die, you are the only person who is by your side from start to end. Everyone else will come and go. Everything else will come and go. You are permanent.
Anushka, changing tact a little bit, but people often are asked about work-life balance, and there is at times, I think, for mums, some stigma around this. I know you have some views about this, whether you can share them.
Work-life balance is so interesting. I think a lot of people put pressure on themselves to have whatever the balance looks like. I'll talk about it in a more generic sort of term, but so many of my clients come in and they're like, you know, I just don't have like the time. Like, I'm supposed to like get up at 5 a.m. and I should like do my journaling, and then I should go for my run, then drink my smoothie, then do that. I'm like, that sounds so hectic. Like, what do you mean? Like, and there's all these, I think social media especially perpetuates that. It's like, here's my 5 to 9 before my 9 to 5. And then here's my 5 to 9 after my 9 to 5. And I'm like, who has so many hours in a day? I woke up, drunk my iodized water, whatever it is. Anyway, I watch a lot of videos and I'm like, this isn't realistic. What I would say about that is, don't put so much pressure on yourselves. I think we live in a world where there's a lot of, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. What I like to do with some of my clients is we'll go through and go, okay, what time do you wake up? What time do you generally go to sleep? And then we like pop it into like a calculator essentially, and we go, how many of those hours are you working? And we calculate the percentage, and we're like, okay, out of 24 hours, like 30% of your day is already going into work. Maybe another 30% of that is going into sleep. How much time do you really have left between your commute, having to cook dinner, like maybe like, you know, if you've got children, you're looking after them. If you're like wanting to go out to do the gym or something, there's a commute and coming back and the 1 hour involved in that. Like, you don't really have a lot of time in your day. So doing what you can do and being okay with that. Stigma around moms. I actually can't remember what I discussed with you.
No, that was more my comment.
Yeah.
But about discussing what you were saying there, was that sometimes it's not so much, as you said just at the end there, about work-life balance, but being okay with what balance you choose or what balance you feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
Not just aiming for, oh, it must be 50-50.
Yeah.
Or
Oh my
I need
God.
to spend, 50% of my energy on my work and kids if I have kids.
Yeah.
It's more about what you were saying, being okay with what you choose, and be
work-life
comfortable
balance,
with that.
Absolutely. And work-life balance looks different for everybody, right? As somebody who's neurodivergent, for me, I know that I'm going to have my days where my dopamine's really high. That means I'm going to be super productive that day. I'm going to clean my house if that's what I'm doing. If I'm not, then I'm going to be report writing, or I'm seeing clients, or I'm doing my admin work. And I will spend that whole day, maybe the next day if my energy's still going, and do all of that. Then I know that I hit a bit of like a lull, and that I need a whole day to just do nothing. And that's okay. That's my version of balance. And coming to terms with that takes a little bit of time. But figure out what works for you.
Now, Mia, how can organisations promote mental health as a healthy habit?
Yeah.
Just some of your insights.
I find this, I'm often asked like by organisations, well, what can I do to invest in my people? And I feel like, again, we're facing an area that there is so much information. Like there is so many tips and tricks and techniques, and here's what you should be doing to invest in your people, and all of that's well and good. But my view is, and again, I'm coming from the perspective of I was once an employee, and I saw businesses and leaders that did this part well, and I saw the ones that didn't do it well at all. For me, the ones that did it well were the ones that were just good people and that cared about stuff. It didn't matter what they did, how extravagant, how time consuming it was. They just did it with really good intentions and because they genuinely cared about the people that worked for them. So that's the first thing. The second thing for me is, I'm highly unlikely to engage with something unless it's normalized and the expectation is set that this is okay to access by a leader or somebody who I look up to within the organisation. So I think, unfortunately or fortunately, a lot of these initiatives do need to be top-down approaches towards them. Otherwise, you can't really expect people to want to engage. And then the other thing is just have the conversation. I mean, we recently had Are You OK Day, and although slightly different, the context is relevant. So many people avoid asking the tough question because they fear that it might trigger something for the other person, or they're going to uncover something that they're not equipped to deal with and they're too scared to ask the question. That's usually not the case. It usually to the other person signals and symbolises the fact that this person actually cares about me. They're noticing that maybe I haven't been as productive lately, or I haven't been as involved and as invested, and they're here to support me. So again, I think they're 3 pretty actionable and easy things to do for organisations and businesses that really truly put people first and don't just talk about the fact that they put people first.
And Mia, what do you think about daily techniques that we can use
To
prioritise mental health?
Again, there are so many tips and tricks and techniques out there. They don't need to be grand, they don't need to be time consuming, they're super accessible. A lot of it is actually just working out what you already enjoy and taking the time to think about it properly, but properly stop and go, okay, when I go for my walk, how do I feel afterwards? What you do doesn't really, really matter at all. It could be gardening, like you said, it could be applying your skincare. But the point is that you're actually taking the time to think consciously about what it is that fills up your cup and what makes you happy and whole. And then hopefully once you've had that sort of connection, or you've made that connection with the practice that makes you feel and actually does make you better, you can start leaning on that more frequently. I mean, for me, it's literally putting my phone down to play with my daughter. That's it for me. And it's so, I guess, not mindfulness related. But for me, that's what makes me happy and healthy and whole at the end of each day.
Moment.
Exactly.
But that's
living in
also
the
such
moment.
a mindful moment, right? We think mindfulness needs to look like meditation and you sit down and you do the yoga. No, it can just be like you ate a meal, your phone, no TV, and you enjoyed what you were eating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's, back to sort of EQ and to create that connection, I can sit here and say, this is what you'll be doing and this is how many minutes you'll be doing for that at EQ, and it's a 3-hour journey, but for me the most important thing is that you're actually taking 3 hours that you wouldn't ordinarily take to stop and think about yourself. Again, the added benefit is these practices make you feel amazing and they're all great and they're super accessible, But the point that I'm trying to make is, how often do you take time for yourself? And sorry, but we're going to force you to do it today because you deserve it.
All right, well, we're reaching the end of our discussion. So panel members, to each of you, what's your top tip for prioritising wellness at home or in the workplace? Maybe Bianca, if you could go first.
I think what served me well at home and at work is always communicating how I feel. My husband, I always say to my husband, so I've been thinking, and he's like, oh God, not again. And I'm sure some people at work feel that way too. But I think that helps me, and I think that you get trust from people and that they give it back to you as well. So not being afraid to communicate or be vulnerable. And delegation.
Yeah.
At home and
Oh
at
my
work.
God.
I've currently
Such a big one.
delegated my husband to sleep next to the 2-year-old so I can sleep alone in the bed and get sleep. So,
Anushka, what's your tip?
I want everyone to close their eyes for this tip. Close your eyes. Okay. Take a deep breath in. Now let it go. I want you to picture the person you love the most in this world. Can you see them clearly in your head? I want you to picture that we're going to Freaky Friday it. You swap bodies for 1 whole year, and at the end of the year, you're going to Freaky Friday again and switch bodies. How would you treat that body for a whole year, knowing that it was the body of the person you love the most in the world? Consider that for a moment. I want you to take whatever you've thought about for that person and apply it to yourself. Because it's so much easier to love others than it is to love ourselves, I think. It's a really difficult journey, self-love. And being able to picture this, even in the moments where you need to slow down a little bit, it can just be so helpful. So that's my little tip for you. Whenever you're feeling super stressed out, think about, if this was a person that I loved, how would I be treating their body and their mind? You can open your eyes now.
Oh, that's a tough act to follow. Gosh. Prioritising wellness at home in the workplace. I think for me, it is seeking out whatever it is, either at home in the workplace, and doing something because it makes me content,
Yeah.
like irrespective of what it is. And it's back to that work-life balance discussion. You know, life is always out of kilter. Like, sorry, whoever tells you that you can have work-life balance is a liar, or they're doing something incredibly well. I don't know. But for me, it is
22 million.
Yeah, exactly. I've just started to appreciate that whatever I pick up, whatever I do, it has to make me content. Otherwise, it is not worth my time. And that is like my meditation practice, if I'm doing that, or, you know, literally starting a new career. I'm doing something because it makes me content.
Yeah. Intention, right? Intention's really important.
Yeah.
So, what an amazing discussion we've had. Any questions for our panel? Priscilla?
This might be directed maybe more towards Anushka, but how do we go about doing all of these well-being things and taking time for ourselves without also feeling selfish at the same time?
Yeah, that's a big one, hey?
We've got all these other things that we could be doing, all these other people we could be tending to,
Yeah.
but we also need to take a moment and go, actually,
Yeah.
but then again, I feel that side of selfishness to go with it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I get what you mean. This is a really tough one. Look, I'm the eldest daughter in a Brown household, so I don't know whether if I've actually figured that one out yet. I'm going to be really honest with you. And I talked to my best friend about this recently too. I was like, how do you stop the guilt? You know, because you do feel it. I feel like that there are so many people pulling at me, needing things that they're not necessarily urgent, but I think because for such a long time I've been able to see what the consequences would be if I don't intervene at a particular point or don't do this thing with this person, or like, I don't know what it is. It's just little things, you know, like reminding my little brother to do certain things, like have you text dad for this thing, or like reminding my partner to do a particular, like all these little things come together. If I feel like if I don't do that, then the consequences X, Y, Z, then I'm gonna have to deal with the consequences of that action. So you feel the guilt of not being there for your family because they need you, but then you also feel the stress of it all and a bit of the resentment. I think it comes back to the fact that, like, again, touch wood, but if I ever wasn't around, they'd have to figure it out. And the reality is that if we choose to take a little bit of a step back for some, you know, I mean, this is obviously not the case for, like, if you have small children, don't leave them alone. Would not advise, yeah. But like for anybody else in your life, the reality is that if you weren't around, they'd have to figure it out. And sometimes, you know, we don't allow the people in our life to grow and to develop the tools that they need to be able to manage their lives because we're there all of the time and we're intervening. So sometimes I think to myself, well, this is for their own good. And then I go distract myself with a podcast or a book or something, and I'm like, this is just my time for now, and I will focus on doing that. And I think the reality is, it's like, you know, you were saying earlier about how there's always going to be something to do. There's always, and so if that is going to be your life story, you might as well take out a bit of time, because, like, what do you have to lose, really? You know, and you'll come back, you'll feel less resentful, and you'll be able to do that thing for them better. Even though that's not the reason you should be doing self-care, but you'll be a little bit more tolerant of the people around you, a little bit more patient, you know. But I do think that the guilt of it all can be really, and there's a lot of self-shaming as well, you know, and then expectations. Like, I know for me, there's a lot of cultural expectations as well. So, yeah, it's a tough one.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Anushka, for you as well. You said that as a neurodivergent person, you know, one day dopamine's a high, you can smash everything out, but the next day they're low, you can't do it. And it's okay to have that time to you. But working, you know, I have to count every 6 minutes of the day. It's an expectation that I hit X productivity, even at a higher level. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, there's two aspects. One is the external expectations of your workplace, and the other is your internal expectations. I think being neurodivergent, the person who is hardest on you is you, because you constantly feel like you are letting people down. And on top of that, you feel like you're going to get told off every other 5 minutes. You're like, oh my God, I'm doing the wrong thing. There's two things here. One is, how do you manage being able to, like, you know, organize your weeks and days, and depending on the type of neurospicy that you are, different parts of, and especially being a woman, one of the things that I've been working on with some of my clients recently is, how do we plan out your month according, and like map out what your energy levels are going to look like, and then how are we going to plan out, okay, I'm going to take on more work or less work. Sometimes it's inevitable, but then we make a plan of like what your self-care will look like during that time. And there are really, really specific things that you can do during particular periods. So for example, if you have ADHD, your dopamine levels are going to be higher during your follicular phase, and you're going to feel more productive. So that is the best time to do a lot of planning, meeting up with people. If you're doing exercise for yourself, we're looking at more high intensity, like training, those kind of things. And like, really, I know it feels so like you have to plan it all out, but like, it does work. And like the things that you're eating and all that sort of stuff can then change. Like, we can actually boost your like energy levels at particular times. I think there's a lot of prep work that needs to go into it, if that makes sense. In terms of how do you deal with it right now as you're going through it, it's a really hard one. I'm going to be really honest with you. You come home and you just feel tired. And I think the reality is that something has to give. For everything that you say yes to, you're saying no to something else in your life. So if I am having to, because I have to say yes to work today, like, it's inevitable for me too. Sometimes I have to see clients and I'm like, oh, I will love my job, but sometimes I'm exhausted. Then there's nothing else that I do in that day, you know. And at the moment I have that luxury. Like, I just have my partner and then the rest of my family, but I don't have kids yet. So I know that I can come home and just lay on the couch and that's it, you know. And that week, if I'm feeling lots of low dopamine days, I just have to be kind to myself, I guess, and be okay with, like, the work day is over now. Nobody talk to me. No discussions. Don't ask me about anything. But yeah, allowing yourself to have that space if you can't allow it throughout the day, I guess.
Angela, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm curious what you're seeing with regard to the right to disconnect. And I know it's still early days. Some of the women I'm speaking to are saying, you know what, in theory it's great. I love that this whole scheme has started. However, to get ahead in my firm, I know I need to be doing more than some of the men. I need to check my email after hours. I need to be online, or I've taken time off during the day. So am I going to be criticized? Is someone going to slap my hand? What are you seeing? Like how is it showing up? How's it rolling out?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that the right to disconnect laws are good, but they're mainly geared towards award covered employees. So, you know, like the clerk's award or, you know, sales assistants, that sort of level. In terms of higher level executives, like I had, for example, I had my own sister text me and was like, the right to disconnect, like that's awesome. Now you don't have to work past, you know, 5 o'clock. And I wrote, my text back was like, haha, doesn't apply to me, which is kind of how I feel about it. But it's pretty much if you're an executive level employee or you're a senior employee where you have something in your contract that says, you know, I'm available at all hours and my remuneration reflects this, then, you know, it's different. But I think the takeaway is that the conversations are going in the right direction and that's helpful. And if we were terminated because of that, I think as a senior level employee, my defense, for example, would not be very good because it's like, well, you know, we expect this of you. But if I was a lower level employee, then that's great. Like I would have the right defense. But I think another important point is that just the fact that we're considering this for award level employees morally makes some employers and people go, yeah, maybe like we shouldn't do that. And I think that's helpful. I see your point, and I think that's really valid. And you're right. Another thing that we discussed earlier, I think with the panel, was a lot of government level employees have that just sort of disclaimer in their signature that's like, you know, I'm sending you emails at a time at night or whatever. This time works for me, but I don't expect a response.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing that a lot with lawyers on the other side. And I think there is that appreciation for, you know, people's time and the stress associated with working outside of hours.
It's time of a change of value.
Yeah. And I hope that translates so that there's not this loophole of, you know, if you're an executive and you've got particular wording.
That's actually a really good way of setting boundaries for yourself on a more like on a well-being level. I mean, I have this out of office message that's like, I'll get back to you in how many days, and it's just to set realistic expectations for people who are emailing me. And I might get back to you that day, and that's fine, but maybe I won't. Maybe it'll take me 7 days, and that's just the reality of the situation. I was speaking to someone else in the crowd earlier, like if this was the 90s, you'd be leaving your house for like 3 days and no one would know if you're dead or alive. So like we've become so attached to this idea of getting instant responses to everything. I don't know what the way backwards from that is, but I'll give yourself space to breathe, I guess. Yeah.
Probably got time for one more question if we have any. Yes.
Thank you for a wonderful discussion. I just think as women sometimes it can be challenging to have difficult conversations because you're always trying to think a few steps ahead of all the negative consequences and what the blowback could be. So any practical tips perhaps for having challenging conversations, maybe at a more senior level if you're going up the chain to speak to your boss, or maybe someone on the other side of a matter who you perceive as a bit more senior?
Context, like, do you have an example in terms of just in general, or?
Maybe let's just use hypothetically a workplace example. If you had an issue in the workplace that you wanted to address with your boss, but you thought it was a challenging conversation and not an easy one to have.
Yeah, and that's really important because going back to, you know, stress factors in the workplace and bullying and harassment and so on, and then, you know, investigations are important, raising complaints that should be addressed, you know, adequately is important. If it involved your direct boss, I would go to somebody, I wouldn't go to that person, I would go to maybe, you know, a head of department in another area that's not your direct boss, and just say, you know, I don't feel comfortable raising that with this person, but, you know, I want to let you know this. I would sort of go off to the side. And just practically, I have in my career tried to go to somebody who I think could empathise with me. Sometimes that's a woman, but sometimes it's not. So yeah, I sort of have tried to do that in the past. Yeah.
I think to add to that, there's two things. Because I believe it or not, so many people come into therapy for this exact reason, because they can't have the challenging conversation, whether it's in a workplace or with a partner or a parent or something like that. And we actually do a lot of work around like preparing for that conversation. So what is your intention? Like, why do you need to have this conversation to begin with? Preparing for, like, I guess some of the anxiety can be like, okay, what is going to be said to me? And like, what is the response going to be? Preparing for any of the responses or questions that might come up. And sometimes it takes a Google Doc to be able to put all of that together. But I think it's better than you going in sort of like, I'm going in with this intention and feeling like, oh no, like I'm getting this backlash. I think lots of preparation can help. The other thing is that, sometimes we feel a bit, should I go do this or should I not? And I don't know, it depends on the context as well, but I'm a big believer that short-term discomfort is better than long-term resentment. And if you are in that moment, like, sometimes I'm in that situation and I'll like kind of like rub on my finger and I think about it like 3 times. I'm like, okay, short-term
Pain.
yeah, like it's okay. It is this discomfort that I'm feeling right now, this anxiety is actually better than me getting more and more anxious about it over time than building up resentment for this situation. Yeah.
I also find, me personally, I approach a lot of things like a commercial litigator, because that's who I am. And so I think submissions. I'm gonna tackle the difficult conversation like I would prepare for a case. Sounds funny, but things like, I don't know, you think you're not remunerated as much as you'd like to be. That's a tough conversation for a lot of people. So one of the things I do is prepare just like I would submissions. Why, who, what, when, why should I get it? And I do run, what could they say back to me? I think preparation is key, and I'm also not scared of writing it down.
Yeah,
I find
write it down.
That's a really good way to, I think, about controlling the conversation, making sure that if there's something that you want to say, you get it out. So if you have it written down, and that's okay to bring pieces of paper to conversations.
You're going to feel a lot more grounded in the conversation.
And so you can, sort of say, yep, I've ticked that off. And I know a lot of times with difficult conversations, for me, you can get that sort of imposter syndrome. You think, oh, should I really say that? Should I do that? And what actually helps me is I think of someone who's really confident, and I say, what would that person do in this situation? Not necessarily what I would normally do. And that kind of helps me, gives me the courage or perspective, that maybe it's hard for me, but I think in the situation, that person would take that step or say this. And then obviously you can pare it back.
Think about somebody who has a lot of audacity. I like to think of like the CEOs of like multi-millionaire like companies, and I'm like, what? If they can make a request, I can make a request. Got to start somewhere.
I think also something that I've worked out, this is just how I am, is I catastrophize absolutely every single hard conversation I've ever had in my life. I'm going to ask for a pay rise tomorrow, they're going to fire me. They're going to fire me because I've asked for it. Usually once you work out what it is that you think in your head is going to happen, and then you realise, because you work through it logically, like that's not going to be the chain of events here, it's easier to have that conversation as well.
Alright, so I think that concludes our panel discussion, and I'd just like to say thank you so much, Mia, Anushka, Bianca, for your time, your tips, your contributions. Hopefully for everyone that was an insightful, helpful discussion. And as a token of our appreciation, I just have a few little gifts for you. If we could give them a round of applause.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. And it would be remiss of me not to say a very big thank you to our marketing manager, Sarah Lyons, and to the APW event subcommittee, and also a big thank you to Caroline here up the front, whose idea this was. For the Caroline's contributions to the discussion and the planning. So, thanks very much, and this concludes the formal part of this evening. You're very welcome to stay, have a drink, network. Things aren't closing now, so don't be shy. Have a drink, eat more, drink, and make connections. If there are people who you think you might like to connect with, we've got a broad range of people here. You can always approach me or one of the Aitken or the panel members. You can always approach them with questions, and we can help connect and network, and I hope it was a valuable discussion for you. Thanks again. Thank you.